All right, so on my P drive, I have set up my folder here, P drive Sarcona 2520, and I'm going to make a project. If you did watch the video on preferences, one of the things I talk about is how Maya allows you to copy your preferences back and forth. That's something you want to always take with you. I also need to create a project for this project. So under File in Maya, go to your project window and make a new project and give it a name. I'm going to call mine Sarcona Simple Prop. And I'm going to put that inside my 2520 folder. Wherever you're saving your stuff, that's where you put your location. Okay, and this isn't anything that can't be changed afterwards, so if you didn't watch the videos, you have no idea what I'm talking about, watch the videos, then you'll see, like, this is why we're doing this kind of thing. Essentially, it's Maya's way to keep us organized. In Cinema, we created all the folders manually, and then we would populate all the names and do all that stuff. In Maya, we do this create project, and Maya will help keep us organized, okay? So I go to new, I give it a name, and then I pick my location, which is in my 2520 folder. When we get to the 2540 class for you people, we'll be picking the 2540 folder. And then I'm going to hit accept. Okay. Now, just so you can see it, Maya made that folder for us, and then it made all the folders inside of there. We need to make sure to stay organized that we put the right stuff into the right folders. So of this big clustering of folders, most of the time we're only going to use these three. Scenes, source images, and images. Okay? Scenes is where we're going to save our actual Maya files. So as we're working, we hit save, we make sure it goes into the scenes folder. As long as we've set up our project, we should be good. Source images are any textures that we're bringing in. So if we were to bring in an HDR for the background, we would drop that into the source images folder. If we were to bring in a texture of grain or a texture of wood or plastic or whatever, we would drop that into source images. And then in the images folder, when we render stuff, that's where it's going to go. Okay? So Maya is very smart about this kind of setup because it knows it's important to stay organized. So all of these things it automatically creates for us. The other ones that are here you may use, let's say like autosave. If you have autosave set up, typically they'll go into the autosave folder. If you're doing dynamics, it'll use caches. If you're using some of the other stuff, it'll go into the other folders. For the most part, those three should be sufficient. Okay? So every time we do a new project, this is a simple prop. We go to the project window, we tell it what we're doing, do simple prop, hit accept, good to go. When we come into the next project, we go back to project window, type in the new name, and we start that new project. As we switch between projects, let's say we're working on simple prop today, and next class we're working on something else, I go to set project, and I just tell Maya what project I'm working on, okay? Especially for the people who have me this hour for modeling and the next hour for animation. Why didn't that open? You'll need to switch between the different projects you're working on. So if I'm working on playing around, I hit select folder, and now Maya thinks I'm working on playing around. If I'm working on my simple prop, I go back to set project, I click simple prop, and now I'm working on simple prop, okay? It's going to be confusing at first. Everyone gets confused with it. The first time I got into Maya a million years ago, it was confusing. I didn't no idea what I was doing. Now it's second nature, okay? Just like your hotkeys, the more you use these things, the easier it's going to be. All right, so we talked last time about the three basic tools that we would use inside of Cinema 4D to model stuff. What are those three things? Yep, bevel and knife tool, right? So basically we have divisions, we have bevel, which adds divisions but also round stuff, and then we have the extrude, which gives us extra faces and that kind of thing. So I'm in Cinema just so you can see this. I want to show you those three tools just to refresh your memory. So if I were to grab edges in here, and then I went to bevel right there, I could click and drag and create a bevel right on this surface, right? All my options for my bevel show up on this side. Once I'm done with my bevel and I'm moved on, no matter what I do, clicking on the cube, clicking anywhere else, those options are gone. I can't get those back, right? If I go to edges again, I go to my knife area, there's several spots, right? There's line cut, plane cut, loop path cut. I think that's only 3, yes. Edge cut, there it is. There's also polygon pen, I kind of use it for it, but that's it, yep. So I could do line cut, and I could individually click on these if I needed to. I could go to loop cut and click like this, okay? That's what that tool did. And then if I go to faces and I click on stuff and I go to extrude, this is where it becomes hard to use the hotkeys or menus because you forget what the things are actually at. There you go. And I can extrude this, okay? Now the same thing, once I've used any of those tools, the second I'm done using the tool, I can't access those things again. It's locked into whatever that surface is. When we're using Maya, it's not the case. Maya saves every single thing that we do until we tell it to go away, okay? So what that means for us, though, is that at any point we can go back and edit stuff to a point. We can't always do it, but most of the time we can do it. Or lots of times we can do it. So basic tools in Maya. So under Create, this is where we're going to find all of our creation tools. So spheres, cubes, cylinders, very much like you would find inside Cinema. So while we're screwing around, let's go to Create Polygon Cube. All right, but of course, obviously, the initial part is very clunky. If you remember inside of Cinema, how we would zoom, rotate, and pan around, those should still be the same, okay? So we should still be able to hold Alt and left click and drag, middle click and drag, and right click and drag to spin around, to zoom in and out, to tumble, to pan our camera around. Okay, so all of those things are still there. You can still click with your mouse and zoom in, but I don't recommend it, okay? As you get closer to things, typically it's going to jump you into objects. Get used to using Alt and using those 3 hotkeys on the mouse to move in and out and all that. Do you remember what the hotkey was for framing a selection inside Cinema? No? Good. We don't need it. It's F. It's just F. In Cinema, it's like some crazy one. If you just hit F with something selected, it frames it, jumps it right in there, you're ready to go. Now the reason for that is sometimes we get lost. I don't know where my stuff went, everything is gone, I hit F, boom, it's back to where it was, okay? Just like Cinema, you can get lost in Maya as well. A couple of interface differences. So in Cinema, we would have on the top right our object list. And we did a lot of work in the object list. We also did a lot of work in the attributes area on the bottom right. Here, we're not. Most of the work that we're going to do is going to be right in that main interface. Okay? We will touch on other areas, but most of our work we do is going to be in other spots. On the left side here, this is the outliner. If you don't see the outliner up here, you can click this button and it'll pop the outliner open. It should be the bottom button of these little things. The outliner is basically your object list. It's mainly for keeping things organized. In Cinema, we would have different tags we would add to the end of it. We don't have that inside of our object list. This is strictly what's the name of the object and then how is this thing organized. That's what that is, okay? On the far right side, we have what's called the channel box. So you'll see things like translate, rotate, and scale. In Cinema, we didn't really have a lot of times where we were using these, okay? It did exist, right? So if I were to click on the object and I went to coordinates, we did have that kind of area here where we could type these things in, but I don't know, I never really showed it because I never really use it in Cinema. I use other stuff. But in Maya, I will use this a lot, okay? One thing that's important to know about Maya is that everything is, well, not everything, most of the things that we have here can be manipulated through virtual sliders or through tools. Virtual sliders are, if we were to click and drag on this translate X where the 0 is, it actually is a slider that we could then move. Okay, there's no slider, there's no arrows or anything. It's just clicking and dragging right in that blank area allows us to adjust where that is. We can also obviously use the move tool to move stuff around as well. As we're modeling stuff, don't move it away from the center, okay? If I'm modeling, let's say, a box that we're going to be doing, I wouldn't want to have this box way over here because it's going to be hard to then duplicate stuff and have it show up on either side if I do that. If I keep it here, whatever I have on the right, it's easy to just flip over to the other side, okay? So anytime we model, we keep everything locked in right there. Now we do have this area. I'm going to scoot this down a little bit more so we can see this. So we have our translates, rotates, scales, visibility. We have this area down here, which is the input connections, okay? So if you were to click on the polycube, the word polycube there, and remember we went to create polygon cube to get to this. If we clicked on polycube, you'll see it says width, height, depth, and then subdivisions, width, height, depth, and then this create UVs. And I'm just bouncing back to Cinema just to kind of show you where those things are so you're more comfortable with maybe the transition between them. Here's our size, here's our segments. Here's the size, there's the segments, okay? So we still have that same amount of information. One of the things we had in Cinema, if I wanted to grab this point right here and move that point around, I had to hit the letter C that would go into edit mode that then allowed me to grab the point, which then allowed me to click it, and that allowed me to move it, okay? When I'm in Maya, it's not that way, okay? In Maya, at any point, I can bring up the vertices or the faces or the edges and tweak those. There's no magical way to get from where I'm at here into that mode. So if I wanted to, let's say, extrude a face, I'm going to right-click and hold right on the middle of this cube and go to face. Okay, so right-click and hold on the cube, go to face, and then let go of your mouse. Okay, that menu that came up, that's called a marking menu. And you'll find there's probably 100 of them hidden all over Maya. The more comfortable you get with the software, the more you'll find, the more you'll use. And a lot of people who work in the software will actually use it. Oh, Maya just crashed. That will not be the last time that happens. As we duplicate objects, it doesn't maintain whatever history was there, okay? So here I have a regular cube. If I were to copy and paste this, which we never actually copy and paste, we would just hit Control D to duplicate. You'll see that I have two cubes, but this cube has inputs and the new cube does not have inputs, okay? So something to be aware of if we wanted multiple items, we wanted multiple things on there. There are ways to do that, we just typically don't really need to do it. All right, so we're back to right-clicking on the cube, going to face, and then we can click on one of the faces. Now at the top here are all the major tools that we would be using for editing polygons. So there's mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, mesh display, and so on. Again, you're free to go up there and use those tools if you want, but if you want to get started the correct way on this, hold down Shift, hold down right mouse button, and this is the interface that you should get used to, okay? This is basically, I have a face selected, Maya's recognized I have a face selected, and it's telling me these are all the things that you can do with this face, okay? So if I wanted to extrude it, I can just go right to extrude and let go, and now I'm in the extrude tool. If you go up here, Jordan. All right, so this is the extrude tool. You'll notice that instead of having that object area in the bottom right that gives us our options, we have two things that happen. One, we have this little box that popped up. That's like the top list of things that you would do with this specific tool, okay? Thickness, local translate Z, offset, divisions, and then keep faces together. On the right side in the channel box, that's where all of the options are, okay? 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you never have to go into the channel box to tweak any of these settings unless you decide to do it after the fact. Typically, this little box is good enough, and you can see how you can move the box pretty much anywhere you want. I mentioned virtual sliders. Everything is a virtual slider. Same thing here. So if I were to click on the word thickness and drag left and right, you can see how I can adjust the thickness of that. And if I went to local translate Z, we're going to get the same kind of result here because they do a similar thing. If I do offset, if I go with divisions, and then this won't do, we won't, in this case, we're not going to see anything happen, okay? But that's what that's doing. Okay, so just grab the face, extrude it, use something so it's out of the way. Okay, and now what we're in is called component mode. This allows us to edit components, points, vertices, edges. Do you remember what color this cube was before we went into component mode? Not the cube itself, but the lines around it. Green, yep, okay. Anytime we have something in green, that's object mode. Anytime we have blue, that's component mode, okay? Now how we switch back and forth is F8 on your keyboard. Now, I also have other ways that I prefer to do things. You can also right click and hold and just go to object mode. Okay, so the same way we went to faces, we can right click and go to object mode, and now we're back to object mode. Okay, F8 is good if we had a bunch of objects. I have 20 objects, I want to grab all their points. I can hit F8, get into component mode, grab all the points. Or I can hit F8 and get out of it. This is really kind of like one object at a time. I can do this. For right now, that's typically what we're going to be doing is one object at a time. So I'm going to right click, go back to face, and I'm going to select the faces all the way around here. I give you the option of doing it the long way. You click on one face, you rotate, click the next face with shift, click the next face with shift, click the next face with shift. If you want to do that. The other way is you click, hold shift, double click the next one, and that will loop it all the way around. Or you can just find a good angle where you can see it all. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you grabbed, it's just a matter of going through the steps of how this tool works. So I have all the faces selected. I want to go back to extrude. Okay, what was the last tool that I went in? The last tool that I just used. How do we make it change shape? Extrude. That was the last tool we used. So we can, again, right-click, hold shift, right-click, and go to extrude. Definitely can do that, okay? Because extrude was the last thing we did, I can also just hit G. And Maya will remember you just went to extrude. I'm going to go back to that last tool. So now I'm just extruding another piece. So there's thickness. Let's go to offset a little bit. That's kind of cool. Now in this case, you have multiple faces selected. You extruded, turn keep faces together off. And then what we probably see is something like that happening. Might not be exactly like that, but it's something like that. All All right, now it will take some time getting used to how Maya moves around, how we're able to get from one tool to the next tool to the next tool. Okay, that's why this first project, Simple Prop, is more of like a let's play with the tool and get used to it. Let's play with the software and get used to how it's modeling. Go to object mode, delete your cube. Remember, you can go to F8, that gets you to object mode, or you can right click on it and go to object mode, and then you can hit delete. Okay, locating all the stuff is obviously, it's a huge thing. These menus are all over the place. There's lots of details, lots of things to read. You'll see menus inside menus. Most of the stuff we don't use. Like, rarely do I use anything really from down here. Most of the stuff that I use is right inside this area or way here at the bottom, okay? So we have a new cube. The last tool we need to see is bevel. So in order for bevel to work, we have to grab a face, an edge, or a vertex. You'll see all three of those are represented here. Edge, vertex, and face. Okay, so you pick whichever one you want. You click on it, and then you can shift right click and go to bevel. All right, now inside each one of our tools, there's a million options for each thing. Again, most of the stuff you don't need to play with, you don't need to be concerned with. But some of the stuff that we obviously do. Again, Maya is great for showing you these are the top things that you're typically going to play with. So on this poly bevel, you'll see that this stuff popped up. Here's fraction, segments, depth I typically don't use, or any of these other ones, okay? So if I were to change my fraction to, let's say, 0.1 and change the segments to 3, you can see how I can get now a nice rounded bevel on top of that. Okay, and again, I can always come back and modify, this number if I need to. Now, whenever we do something like a bevel, most of the time, we're never going to go back and edit that bevel, okay? So if I were to do an extrude and then a bevel, then an extrude and a bevel, I would never go back to that very first bevel and start tweaking the settings on it because that could follow up the chain and screw up where I'm currently at, okay? And beveling realistically is something we would do after the fact. Anytime we model something, we start off with the biggest shapes and then we work our way in towards the tiny details, okay? So just as an example on something like this, he wouldn't go into this piece modeling these tiny little pieces here before he had the rest of this kind of fleshed out, okay? Same thing, Same thing on this. These little dips that are in here, he'd most likely have those as one of his third or fourth things that he did after he got the generic shape of this box. And then he would work towards these bigger pieces, then he would work towards these pieces, then he'd work towards these, and then he would pop some other stuff in there. Now, we can model stuff. If we're good modelers, we can model a lot of things as one piece, but most of the time we're not going to, okay? If you remember the drone from the intro class, most of that was one piece. Like the body was one piece, but then the propellers were different pieces, the caps were different pieces, the legs may have been different pieces. Same thing with something like this one. Most of these are separate pieces. All the stuff that's up here is most likely a separate piece. On this one, this top part, where'd it go? There it is. This top part and this handle are all part of the same piece because they flow nicely from one spot to the next spot. Now, we should be able to look at something like this and kind of set up what we think that the layout of the positions would be, the layout of the points would be, okay? Anywhere we see these kinds of like insets, most likely we have to have a face there that we could then push in and extrude. Anywhere we have this handle coming out, we have to have divisions there that we could then pull out for that handle to be there, okay? Same thing here with these shapes. You have to have some sort of look of the points, of the lines, of something so that they work correctly there, all right? So now watch how I'm able to create some of the basic shapes that we just saw. So I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to get the rough dimensions of it like so. And then I'm going to create first the shape of the overall container. You'll see that it's kind of like flat on top, some bevels, and then flat on the sides, and then more bevels, right? That's what it looks like. So I'm going to go to my edges, and I'm going to grab all these edges. Okay, I grabbed all the edges all the way around here. I'm going to shift right click, and I'm going to say bevel. Now if we look at this shape here, you can see that's that. That's what I just created, was this thing. Now the proportions are not there, so I'm going to lower this a little bit. And that looks a bit better. It doesn't look exact, it doesn't have to, but it's pretty close. Okay. All right, so that looks pretty good. Oops. I'm going to inset this as well. So I'm going to go to faces, and I'm going to shift click both of these. I'm assuming in this case that both sides are exactly the same. Eventually we'll get into mirroring things, modeling one piece, flipping it over to the other side. Maya is a bit different than Cinema. I don't want to confuse us too much already. So I'm going to extrude this. I'm going to take my offset down. And for offset, I typically don't use a slider. I typically type it in, okay? 0.08, that looks pretty good. There we go. Now I've offset it. I'm going to extrude it again, and then I'm going to push this in. Okay? So this got pushed in, that got pushed in. They both look exactly the same because I've selected the same face, moved them the same amount. Just like Cinema, we have to be careful. It's still easy for me to do this. Think I have just that face selected, but I've selected other stuff too, and I start destroying that. Okay? So we want to make sure we don't. So that gave me the basic shape of this. Now I want to create these faces here. So now I'm going to go back to my object mode, and I need to add divisions to this, okay? Now it looks like these are pretty evenly spaced. There's 4 of them. If I measure the distance here, there, obviously that's a bigger space, here and there. They're pretty even, not exact. So I want to create something that's even. If I just went to my Insert Edge Loop tool and I just started doing this, that's eyeballing it, it's not very even, okay? I can't go back to down here under Polycube and start to add divisions to this because we'll start to get this kind of thing. Now that might be a cool shape later down the line that I say, hey, I actually want that. But for this, I don't. So I'm going to go to Insert Edge Loop. Now I'm going to go to this other thing. This here are the options for that. Every one of these that have a little box next to them, those are the options. If you set the options once, those are going to be the options until you reset it or go back to the defaults, okay? As you get comfortable with the software, you'll understand what options are good, what tools are good, and go from there. So I want multiple edge loops. I'm going to look at this and say, okay, I need 1 for this side, 1 for that side. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think 8 edge loops. Okay, actually I think I'll do 10, and then I'll adjust it from there. So I'm going to go here, and I just click. When you have something like multiple edge loops, there's no dragging. It'll automatically just drop 8 of them perfectly in alignment. There we go, or 10 of them. When I'm done, I make sure I reset so that I don't accidentally keep that on every time I click. So there. So now I have edge loops. I'm going to go to faces. Do I want that yet? No. Okay. So now I need some more edge loops going this way. So let me go back to my objects. Let me go back to, insert edge loop. And I'm going to need an edge loop here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 edge loops. So multiple again, 4 again. Click there. Now that didn't go on the bottom too. Maybe the bottom wouldn't have it. I guess it really doesn't matter, so we're not going to see it. So I'm just going to leave it there. Okay. So I haven't adjusted any spacing. All of those things very similar to how we would do it inside Cinema. If I double click this edge, where's my middle? Here's my middle line right there. Double click this edge, and then I scale those out. I'm keeping them even, okay? Same thing here, same thing there. Scoot that over. I'm just redistributing these lines. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to go to faces. I'm going to put the big one here. And I'll put the small one right there. Okay, so those look like they're good. They're selected. I'm going to extrude. I'll go to offset. That's not enough. There we go. And then I'm going to extrude again. And then I'm going to push it down. Back to object mode, click off, click back on. All right, so that's pretty blocky, pretty chunky. That's what that's looking like, you know, similarly. Now, if I were to hit 3, 1 in Maya is rough mode. That's what we're seeing right now. 2 is smooth and rough, and 3 is just smooth. So if I hit 3, I'm able to see what this is going to look like in smooth mode, which looks pretty decent. If we were in Cinema, we would have that subdivision modifier. We would turn it on and off, and then we'd be able to see that. In Maya, we can just hit 1, 2, or 3, and it'll give us a preview of what that is. Or we can toggle between 1 and 3. Okay? Now, looking at where this is, this edge is gone. The second I hit 3, you'll see that it goes away. We don't see that nice crisp edge anymore. It's just disappeared. Also, this side is all squishy and weird looking. That's gross. I need some crispness all the way around this. So that's where bevels come in. So now I'm going to go through and I'm just going to grab areas that I think should have bevels, and I'm going to put bevels on them. This one here, I'm going to avoid that at the moment. Actually, yes, yeah, that's fine. Grab this. So I'm just shift double clicking all the way around. I think I will put that one there. This. And you'll see that it stops when I'm double clicking, because what happens is it doesn't have 4 sides, so it doesn't know what to do. And then of course I have to make sure that the other side is also selected. And this is probably the worst part of modeling, is making sure that you've selected all the correct stuff. So I'm just shift double clicking, shift double clicking. That should be good. All right, so now bevel. And then I'm going to look around and make sure that nothing broke. If it broke, I would basically see a double edge turn into a single edge, turn back into a double edge, or something like that. So I don't see that. Everything looks like it's good. I'm going to take my segments up to 2. I'm going to take my fraction down to 0.25. I think that should be good. Back to object mode, hit 3, click off, and there we go. So we have something that looks very similar to that. Okay? Yeah, it looks like a little bit crisper on the bottom here. So I'm actually going to go to my poly extrude 3. I'm not going to add any divisions. I'm just going to offset, nope, my poly extrude 4. I'm going to offset that a little bit. Too much. There we go. And then I'm going to go through these and just add a little bevel on the inside of these two. Oops. You'll notice that it's kind of like selecting horizontal edges, or like going the other way. It's because of how I'm selecting it. I'm just hitting undo and then reselecting those. After I'm done with this, I'm going to give you the rest of class to play with this, to play with these tools and just get used to using them. Because if we can't use these tools, it's very difficult to model anything, because obviously everything is based off of these. I think it should be good. There we go. So now we have a little bit crisper edges right there. That looks pretty decent. Obviously not the same spacing. I'm going to go here and here, scale these apart a bit. And then I'm just going to add in, let's say, extrude this some, go to 0.2, nope. That's good. And extrude this again, push it down, offset this again. And then throw in some more bevels. Once you do this process, you'll see how these kinds of things you can do over and over and over again just in random spots and get these really cool results. There you go. Now you'll notice on this one, this rounded that off. So even though I have this square here, when I hit 3, it's rounding it. So if I go to Insert Edge Loops, and I put an edge loop in right here, and an edge loop in right there, that went all the way around, and then I'll put one in here, and I will put another one in there. That will make that a nice crisp area, okay? Then if I was going to make a module or something, I could actually build a module and drop it into that spot. Okay, anything else I need, same thing, same process. Go in here, grab an area like this and like that. That's the same. I'm going to extrude, I'm going to offset. 0, 2. Extrude again, pull it up, extrude again, pull it up. Okay, it gives me little nubbies because I don't have any bevels on there. And then I would go through and I would bevel again. Now what you don't want to do is what I'm doing here is I've added my tight bevels to keep my edges in line, and then I'm modifying this more with bigger shapes and then trying to add more detail to it with more bevels and all that. I really shouldn't have put these bevels in until I'm ready for all the bevels in there. I should have had these things pulled out and everything else so that it would all work, okay? So let me just save this real quick and I'll show you an example of one that I worked on earlier. This is demo box. Yes. My box. Right. So this was done the exact same way. It's just I've isolated pieces and I've created that shape. I added divisions. I extruded things up to get this piece, to get this piece, to get that piece. I grabbed these faces here, I extruded those in, pushed them down, create more faces there. Same thing up here. This is the bottom of that, and it looks, you'll see the same thing. It's just the same exact process, just grabbing stuff, grabbing faces, extruding them, beveling them, inserting edge loops where I need divisions. I do have some random pieces here that I just created and put on top. So this is just a cube that I kind of deformed, and then I moved it around. Here's a handle. This is basically a cube that I deleted some faces and extruded. Very similar to the way we did on the drone. Here's a cylinder. Here's another cylinder. Here's a cube with just some fancy extrusions on it and bevels to make it look like it's something that would actually function. Oops. Here's an extrusion in the corner, and I put this cylinder here to, again, give that some detail. Okay? And on the back of this, I have a hinge. That is nothing but a cylinder that I've duplicated a bunch of times, and then another cylinder in the middle of it. Okay? So, for the rest of class, I want you to go through, play with beveling, play with extruding, play with inserting edge loops. If you come up with a crap shape, delete the shape, make a new one. If you come up with another crap shape, delete it, make a new one. This is the time to play and mess around with the tools. Next week, when we come in, we're going to actually build the one we're going to use for our assignment. Okay? So the more comfortable you are moving, rotating, scaling, they work the same way. Hotkeys and everything are very similar. Rotating, scaling, whatever. They're on the list. Rotate or extruding, beveling, and inserting edge loops are all I did for this shape here. There's nothing outside that. Okay? Questions yet? You know,